Hey triathletes, I'm Coach K. I'm sure you're all familiar with this. Kona, Hawaii, every year, hundreds of elite triathletes gather here to test the prowess of human endurance, mental and physical endurance. A lot of you have probably been there. Most of you want to be there. Whether you've been there or not, I want you to close your eyes for a second. Take a deep breath in. Let it out. Now with your eyes still closed, imagine yourself on the Queen K Highway. The sun's beating down. Your feet hurt. Your legs, your entire body hurts. You're thirsty. You're at mile 18. What's going to get you to that finish? What are you thinking about? Are you thinking about the pain? Are you thinking about your pace? Are you thinking about your breathing? What are you focusing your attention on? So as an athlete, there's going to be a ton of information that you're going to have to think about. And it can be overwhelming. Ooh, look, squirrel. It can be distracting. Focus is the information that you decide to focus on. And that can have a powerful effect on your performance. So when we're training as an athlete, we're training two different things. We're training our bodies, the physiological adaptations that we're looking for, like increased lactate shuttling, and the mental side. So Dr. Brian Zuliger of Adams State created this mental strength hierarchy pyramid. At the base we've got the motivation. That's what keeps us going. At the top we've got resilience. But right here in the middle we've got focus. So when we think about focus, there's 4 dimensions to focus. You've got internal and external, external, and then you've got associative and dissociative. And then there's a combination of all of these. That's what the 4 quadrants are. So associative, you think about that as task-specific thoughts and actions. Dissociative are things that are going to separate yourself from the task. So, typically, internal dissociative would be like daydreaming. You imagine yourself at your favorite camping location. Then you've got external dissociative, so that's like you're cheering crowds. The Ironman announcers saying you are an Ironman. Listening to music, watching videos. Associative externals, pacing strategy, mile markers, route conditions, things that are more related to the environment but are associated with the task of running or completing an Ironman. Internal associative, so these are your physiological and sensations that you're thinking about. Breath rate, pain, thirst, fatigue, perspiration. Now, if you look at this, is there one spot that could be detrimental to performance if you hang out there too long? Exactly. This quadrant right here is proven to be detrimental to performance if you stick out there too long. So there was a study conducted that had trained runners conduct a running task on a treadmill. During the evaluation, they were instructed to either not focus on any thoughts, focus on listening to music or watching a video screen in front of them, or thinking about their running gait or their breath rate. And the results of that study showed that if the athlete focused on their breathing rate or their gait, that their VO2 and their lactate for that given pace actually increased compared to the control condition. What does that mean? That means that they had to work harder for a given pace. Now, why does this happen? So this happens because think about when you're learning a new skill. You have to really focus your cognition on minute movements. But as you gain experience, you do more reps, that specific movement is more flowy and requires less of your control. But if you're trying to change your cadence or your stroke rate or your pedaling stroke, your muscles, or it requires heavier focus, and it brings you back into that beginning skill acquisition. Now, with that said, as intensity goes up, we're always going to go internal. This is just a human trait. There's nothing we can do to really prevent this. It's how we control it is the big thing. So we can look at the application in two different ways. Performance in competition or reduction of perceived effort. So let's say you're at mile 20 of the marathon in Kona. You're really hurting. You're not really in the race anymore. You're just trying to get to the finish line. This is where you want to dissociate from the race. Now, we all know in Ironman rules you can't listen to music. So what kind of stuff can you do to dissociate from that perceived exertion? One example would be, like I mentioned earlier, you could daydream about your favorite vacation spot. Another thing you could do is start reciting lyrics inside your head. Self-talk. Self-talk is a proven motivational reducer of perceived exertion. So phrases like "go," "you got this," these are common things that you can do, easy things that you can do to dissociate. You could focus on the crowd around you. You could focus on the runners coming the other way. So these are just examples of ways you can dissociate from the task. This is when you're really hurting and you're not really focusing on the competition around you. But if you're trying to focus on the competition, then, like I just said, you can't stay internal for too long, otherwise you're going to be hindering your performance. You're going to have to work harder to go the same pace. So what we want to do, what's recommended, is just doing quick check-ins. So the best way to do this is to establish cues. I recommend a lot of my athletes that we use mile markers to as check-ins. So every mile, especially for my more higher performance athletes, every mile I want you to check in on your lap pace, your average pace. Also, things that could act as cues would be specific parts in the route. You can also do, let's say, you start to get bored, and this takes a little more training for meditation because you need to become aware of when your mind starts to drift and when you get bored. But you can use boredom as a cue to refocus your attention. Might be good to check in on your pace at that time. But establishing cues is a powerful way to guard or control your attentional focus so you don't stay in one area for too long. And we all know that practice makes perfect. So when you're at home or when you're in training, this is when you want to start to implement these attentional focus strategies. So if you're training on the track and you're doing high intensity intervals and you're starting to hurt, so let's say you're doing mile repeats, and at 800 meters or 1200 meters, you want to start practicing imagery. So pick that favorite vacation spot that you've been and try to vividly remember that and see how that feels when you're dissociating from the task. Now, I don't want you to do this all the time because, like I said, it can be not focusing on your task and dissociating from that task could prevent you from hitting your paces and garnering that physiological responses that we want in training. But practicing makes perfect, so you do want to implement this stuff So when it gets into competition, you're not scrambling. Practice self-talk phrases. So things that are good is to have in your daily journal, write down a few phrases that you're going to use early on in competition, in the middle of the competition, and when things get tough. You want to keep it simple, so 2 to 3 phrases for each of those, and just keep practicing those over and over and over again in your runs, spikes, and swims, especially your swims when you have plenty of time to think. All you're staring at is a blue line. And then finally, information appraisal. So learn how you're going to process the information coming in. One thing would be like setting up your Garmin watch or your cycling computer to only display certain things. So when times get tough, you can switch your watch to a different screen, so you only have to look at a smiley face, because I know the new Garmin's you can put images on them. Or let's say you're feeling a little tired, so you don't want to look at your power output for your computer anymore. Have these pages already set up in training, so when it gets to competition, you're set to go. Another thing, so when we were talking about dissociation, one thing you can do is during tough interval sessions, let's say you get home from a long day of work and you really still need to get in a long bike session. Dissociating from that task can be one way that we can get those physiological adaptations that we're looking for. So put on a movie. A lot of athletes I know do this in the winter. They'll put on a long movie and maybe put the Zwift screen right next to it, and that way they can dissociate from the task, and that 3.5, 4, 6 hour bike ride, whatever you have to do, whatever's on the plan, goes by faster. I want to thank you guys for watching this video, and I want to leave you on a note that this is kind of what I remind my athletes. A strong mind and a strong body will always lead to a strong performance. It's not just physiological adaptations that we're looking for. You need to practice your mental skills too.